So here we are, gathered on Father's Day. And I know that brings up many things for different people. All of you have different thoughts when you say Father's Day out loud. For some, gratitude and joy. For others, grief, absence, and complicated memories. For some, a little of all three. All of that, though, is welcome here. You know that. You don't have to check your heart at the door. The word father carries weight. For centuries, it's been tied to power. The power to provide, to protect, but also the power to control, to name, to rule. In all of our religious traditions, we've wrestled with that image of God the Father. King, judge, distant authority. We inherited a sky father and we built our institutions in that image. But fathering, real fathering, is not about domination. It is about partnership, sharing power. I'm going to back up a step, a month, and compare the beginnings of Mother's Day and Father's Day because they are so very different. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on Mother's Day. You did that already. But a quick history. First, I lost her. Julia Ward Howe, in 1870, wrote the Mother's Day Proclamation after the Civil War, including the words, quote, "Women should unite globally for peace," end quote. She wanted an anti-war day of activism. Later, nothing happened over that. Later, in 1914, Anna Jarvis was responsible for making a proposal for a holiday. She wanted to honor her mother, who had spent her work life in public health and peace work during the Civil War. And her vision was a private and heartfelt holiday, symbolized with lots of white carnations. The irony here about these two women trying to create a holiday is that Jarvis spent the last years of her life fighting the commercialization of the holiday that she created. And Julia Ward Howe's Peace Day got swallowed up by the same commercialization. But they both started because of women's activism. Their efforts ended up in a $25 billion holiday with brunch and Mother's Day cards. Later, Father's Day, which actually has been celebrated by the Catholic Church since the Middle Ages, because they had a St. Joseph's Day, which was really Father's Day. In the modern United States version, there was a woman in the early 1900s named Sonora Smart Dodd. Does that name mean anything to anybody? I had to look that name up. I had never heard her name before, but in the early 1900s, she fought for a Father's Day because she wanted to thank her father. It was a one daughter's attempt to thank her father that actually created Father's Day. Congress pushed back for decades on Father's Day, fearing that it would be commercialized, just like Mother's Day. Imagine that, a Congress concerned about commercialization. President Nixon is the one who signed that into law, but not until 1972. We didn't have a Father's Day until then, a holiday, that is. In the 1980s, business interests, finally got it locked into as a retail holiday. The same thing that Congress feared happened anyway. But two holidays born from very different impulses. Peace and activism on the part of women, calling for peace, versus honoring a single dad. But culture and commerce shaped both. And that's why we're here today, celebrating Father's Day. One last word about Julia Ward Howe. I went to college back in the day, way back in the day, to a small school in West Virginia, which is where Julia Ward Howe was born. Every time I drove back, I lived in New Jersey, so I would drive from New Jersey to West Virginia. And every time I did that, I passed through Grafton, West Virginia, which had a sign saying, "Welcome to Grafton, the home of Julia Ward Howe." And then something about the creator of Mother's Day. So I developed a connection with Julia Ward Howe. I saw her name on the sign every time I drove through Grafton, West Virginia. Now, it occurs to me that I need to ask you a question. Do you know the definition of the word theologian? Raise your hands, please, if you know what a theologian is, does. Somehow I thought so. So, I'm going to answer that. A theologian is someone who systematically studies the nature of God, divinity, and religious beliefs. I'll say that again. A theologian, and anybody can be one, but in order to be a recognized theologian, you have to go to school for that. A theologian is someone who systematically studies the nature of God, divinity, and religious beliefs. It also revolves around interpreting sacred texts. I have trouble with that word. Text, T-E-X-T-S. Interpretation of and analyzing spiritual concepts. I want to talk for a second about interpretation. How many of you have this kind, what I'm going to say next, this kind of a church in your background? The minister preaches a sermon and says, God said it, I believe it, and that's it. That settles it. Anybody have that kind of religious? Okay. I've got to share my background. American Baptist. Remember, I was in New Jersey, not Florida. There is not an American Baptist church in Florida. American Baptist does not equal Southern Baptist. American Baptist churches in New Jersey during the 60s, 70s, into the 80s. I'm not sure after that because by then I left. But I grew up as an American Baptist. That meant we had pews and pew cards so that visitors could sign up. And on the other side of that card was a statement that said, there are two basic Baptist beliefs. One is the priesthood of all believers. That means equality on some level. I never tested that. Too late now. Anyway, priesthood of all believers, equality. The second one was, are you ready? Hang on to your seats. Individual interpretation of the Holy Scriptures. Which meant individual interpretation of the Bible.
Wow.
I loved it. That's why I stayed so long as a Baptist. Except when I was 12. You know, that's the year that all kids get baptized or have their not first communion, but some sacrament in the church. I kept asking, what am I going to be saved from? Nobody could answer my question. Well, you know, God saves, Jesus saves everybody's. What? Anyway, I got baptized because, you know why I got baptized? Why I agreed to that? Because my mother would have grounded me forever. Anyway. A feminist theologian examines and reinterprets texts, traditions, and doctrines through the lens of gender equality. A feminist theologian examines all of these things through the lens of women. Because that hadn't been done before. It had never been done before. In other words, feminist theologians challenge patriarchal structures and advocates for full spiritual, social, and institutional liberation of women. And there's one more category, a womanist theologian, much more recent than feminist theologian. A womanist theologian takes the theological and ethical framework that centers religious history, and the lived experiences of African American women. So if you ever see the word womanist, it has to do with Black women. It challenges both mainstream feminist theology, and I'll give you a couple more names in a minute, which historically marginalized women of color, and Black liberation theology, which historically centered Black men. So womanist challenges actually white women and black men. And the term womanist comes from Alice Walker, who said, "Women is to feminism as purple is to lavender." The color purple, Alice Walker. The feminist theologians taught us to question the old hierarchies. Mary Daly, Catholic theologian, Boston College, in the 70s and 80s. You can imagine, well, she stayed in the Catholic Church to try to make changes from within. At this point, I'll tell you my Mary Daly story. I was in New Jersey, very active in now New Jersey. And we heard about Mary Daly because she was writing a lot of books. The first one, I think it was the first one, was called The Church and the Second Sex, Toward a Philosophy of Women's Liberation. And we all jumped for joy. Oh my God, we got to read this book. And we all read Mary Daly. Then we found out she was giving a seminar for the public. And we piled into a car and drove up to Massachusetts to hear Mary Daly. Powerful speaker, powerful woman, powerful ideas. And we took all this back to New Jersey with us. I happened to pick up this whole thing happened at Andover Newton Theological School. I happened to pick up a brochure that was written for the prospective students. On the cover, it said, "Does God keep you up at night?" I looked at this and I didn't know what to think. Put it in a pocket where it stayed for about 5 or 6 or 7 years until I had to answer the question for myself. Does God keep you up at night? Yep. I went to seminary in '94, Andover Newton Theological School. I like to think I have a connection with Mary Daly even from Andover Newton. Okay, she called patriarchy a sin, the lie that power must dominate to be real. Carter Hayward, another feminist theologian, wrote of mutual relation as the shape of the holy. Dolores Williams, a womanist theologian, reminds us that survival, not sacrifice, is the work of love. They asked, what happens when we stop equating strength with control? What happens when love, not power over, becomes the measure of holiness? Partnership means that we share the load. It means that we listen more than we lecture. It means that we recognize that nurturing is not women's work. It's human work, holy work. It is the work of the Spirit that mothers and fathers us all. I think of the story of the father who learns how to braid hair by watching YouTube videos. His daughter asked, and he fumbled. And he watched. And he tried again. The first braid looked like a lopsided snake. The 10th looked like love. I think of the father who shows up to the school play, even when work is demanding, who sits in those tiny chairs and claps like it's Broadway, who saves the construction paper program like it's scripture. That is sacred work. That is partnership with the next generation. I think of the father who apologizes to his grown son. Not a mumbled, sorry if you were hurt, but a real one. I was wrong. I hurt you. I want to do better. He says it without defending, without deflecting. He says it and he means it. And in that moment, power shifts. It becomes shared. That is sacred work. That is partnership across the years. And partnership isn't just personal, it's prophetic. What does it mean to father the world? It means that we as partners take responsibility for the climate that our children will inherit. It means that we show up for justice, even when it's inconvenient. It means that we mentor, we coach, we listen to the young people that are attached to you, who are trying to build a world with less thunderbolt and more tenderness and more kindness. Some of you were fathered well. Some of you were not. Some of you are fathering now. Children, students, neighbors, even ideas. And you worry you're getting it wrong. Let me tell you, if you are showing up with love, with accountability, with a willingness to grow, you are already practicing the promise of partnership. You don't have to be perfect. You have to be present. And for those whose fathers are gone, or who never knew them, or who had to father themselves, you're not fatherless. You're held by this community, by the spirit of life that fathers and mothers us all, that calls us each to nurture and be nurtured. The church, the fellowship, the society, whatever you want to call it, can be a place where we practice fathering one another. So this Father's Day, let us retire the idea of father as distant ruler. Hear that, Washington, D.C.? Let us celebrate the fathers, the grandfathers, the uncles, the mentors, and the friends who practice partnership. Let us honor the fathering in all of us, the capacity to protect without possessing, to guide without controlling, to love without condition. We have 3 slides that, when you see it, I'd like to read it together. There are 3 of them. Let's read it together. Father, as covenant, thy command. Healthy fathering is a living promise. I will listen, I will share power, I will repair when I harm. Fathering as expansive. It belongs to transdance, to grandfathers raising grandchildren, to uncles and mentors, and to ministers who father a community. Biology is one path, nurture is the destination. Fathering as liberation. Our 6th principle, yes, principle. The role of moral community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. A liberated father liberates his family from fear, rituals, and the lie that love must be turned by obedience. Here is your charge for the week. Practice partnership. Learn one thing you don't know how to do. Braid hair. Listen without fixing. Apologize without excuses. Show up for one person who needs you in those tiny chairs. Father the future by doing one small thing for the earth, for justice, for a child who isn't yours. Let power become shared. Let strength become gentle. And let love guide us home. May it be so. And happy Father's Day to everyone. Amen.